Welcome to the Versa Business Tips Podcast. I'm your host, founder, and CEO of Versa Business Systems, Shaheen Masloum. We're here with an awesome guest today. Tom Schwab is the CEO of Interview Valet. He specializes in podcasts, helping people get in front of more people, more customers. How you doing today, Tom?
Shaheen, I am thrilled to be here.
I'm glad to have you too, man. Talking just before, this is my first podcast. I think it's going well, but I'm here to learn from you. This is your forte. I'm just getting started at this thing. And so far it's been great. So for the viewers that don't know you, tell us a little bit about what you do and what your company does.
Sure. I guess the first one is what I believe, right? I believe that we're all one conversation away. Yeah. A lot of times in marketing, people say, oh, you're one funnel away. Well, nothing good in life has come through a funnel, right? There's a place for automation, but your next big customer, your next big partner, your next employee, right, is going to come from a conversation.
Yeah.
And those are what's powerful in business. And so we help businesses, especially, B2B businesses, thought leaders, services, nonfiction authors, coaches, consultants, get on podcasts that their ideal clients are already listening to, right? Stop breaking through the noise because it's not working. Get in on the conversation people are already listening to. And we've been doing that for a decade now. We've got a team of 22 in Europe and North America. Not everybody wants to live in Kalamazoo, Michigan with me.
Absolutely, man. Podcasts, they're huge. So you've been doing this for 10 years?
Yes.
Wow. I'm going to be honest. I didn't listen to my first podcast until probably a year ago, right before I started this podcast.
We started to beta test it early, and it's really just for me. It's nothing in this world is revolutionary. It's evolutionary, right?
Yeah.
My last company was HubSpot's first e-commerce case study. Started it, built it up, sold it off, and people are like, "How'd you do it?" I'm like, all through content and guest blogging, but it doesn't work anymore. And that was like 2014. And I'm like, I bet you could use podcast interviews. And, Shaheen, for the first few years, I'd give my elevator pitch and people would go, what's a podcast? But
I bet
it gave us a chance to figure out the systems, build the relationships. And then really when podcasting took off about 2019, we were ready.
Yeah, definitely, man. So you're one of the industries that COVID just kind of exploded your industry, right? Talk about that. People were at home, they're listening to I saw so many podcasts created during COVID. It was unreal. Like what did that do for your business and your revenue?
Well, it was interesting because initially, like so many other businesses, we lost probably a quarter of our business overnight when we were working with small people, grabbed their money, and they were scared. And I understand that. Yeah. But what happened was the larger companies that still had travel budgets, they had conference budgets. They're like, I still have to hit a number. I've got to figure out another way to do it. So we had been talking to them. So all of a sudden we changed from more mom and pops to going more working with corporate, especially companies that were scaling, ones that weren't just trying to survive, but really trying to dominate their industry. And our team being remote, they were looking for extra work, right? As everybody else was getting laid off, our people are like, I got nothing else to do. Let's do this. So it was like our finest hour. And podcasting really took off. And that gave us the opportunity where people are starting to scratch their head going, why the heck am I, spending a week at a conference to hopefully talk to somebody as they walk by the booth? Why don't I just get our CEO, our thought leader on podcast interviews and let them do it and then repurpose all of that content?
100%. For the new business owners out there, the ones that haven't dived into live events, you could pay anywhere from $5 to $50,000 for a booth at a trade show or a conference or whatever. And, let's say 2,000 people go to that event. You're lucky if a quarter of them walk past your table. And unless you've got 5 guys in front of that, that are grabbing people and talking to everybody walking by, you maybe get 200 to 300 new eyes on your company. And, of those, you talk to 20, 30 on a podcast. I mean, we just hit, we're almost at 10,000 subscribers on our YouTube channel, but we just hit 30,000 downloads. I don't know if all 30,000 of those downloads is listened to the whole episode, but regardless, like for them to download the episode, we know 30,000 people have listened to the that they know who we are at the very least, because to get to our podcast, you got to know who Versa is. And it's amazing the results that we've seen, and the cost has really been very minimal to start a podcast. What is it to get on a podcast? Because, I was on I don't know if you've heard of Business Bros, but I was on their podcast. And I've been on a couple people's podcasts who I had on mine, but you've made me think more about, well, why not be on more podcasts? Because then I'm talking about more about myself and my company. And like you said, if the viewers are or the listeners are my customer base, that's where I should be speaking.
Yeah, and some of them are pay to play, and those are usually the ones that you want to avoid, right? Because they'll take anybody as long as they pay that, right? But you're right. You want to tap into existing audiences, right? You were the micro influencer here. No one looked at this and said, "Oh, I want to listen to this because of Tom Schwab." It's like, no, they already follow you. It's almost like when someone else has a stage. And you said 30,000. It reminded me of a client we had. Pete Vargas spoke at Grant Cardone's event.
Yeah, I love Pete. I was just talking to him last week.
Yeah, and Pete is awesome. And I remember when he spoke at Marlin Stadium. Right?
Yep, I was there. Were you there?
I was there.
Yeah, same. Me and Reese. Yep.
30,000 people. And I remember talking to him the night before. And he was a little bit nervous, right? Who wouldn't be? And I'm like, don't worry. You've spoken to more people than this on podcasts. And he's like, yeah, but they weren't looking back at me.
But they were. Yeah, exactly. And all these people are my client. These are my potential clients. He crushes it now.
But then think about that. Do you remember exactly what he talked about? Probably not. No. Right. Whereas if it's
I do remember it was about stages, because he's the reason why I started a podcast, because I went to his stages workshop, and man.
Yeah, the 10X stages. And so it's one of those things where, you go to a live event, you fly there, you do all of that, and you hope that somebody doesn't get up and go to the bathroom during your talk or be on their phone the whole time. Whereas with the podcast, they can pause it, they can listen to it whenever, or it's timeless, right? You could go back and listen to it or give it to someone else and they can listen to it, right? As you're talking about, who do you sell through? If you were at that event and you're like, oh, I've got to tell my boss about this, he's got the budget. Well, the problem becomes you're going to remember half of it. He's going to remember half of that. And it's so much easier to say, hey, I was just listening to this great podcast that Versa puts on, and check it out. Minute 13 is the good part.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, man. So what if you said you want to kind of stay away from the pay to play? Are you saying like business owners shouldn't be looking to pay to get on other people's podcasts?
The best podcasts are not pay to play. And there's a couple of things. Last year, Bloomberg did an article on this. Unless the podcast states that this is a paid sponsorship, this is a paid placement, it violates that Federal Trade Commission, right? And the host and the guest can get in trouble for it. And you think about it, if you're on a podcast and anybody who pays can be on there, right? The 18-year-old life and business coach could be right in front of you because, well, he paid there, right? People aren't getting on Rogan. They're not getting on 60 Minutes. They're not getting on those because they paid something. No, if you're on those, you earned it.
Right. That makes perfect sense. Okay. So how does your business model work then? Like what is, explain your process, so a business owner comes to you and they're like, look, man, I need to get in front of more people. What does that look like?
So I start with, why do you want to do it? Right. It's not just to get in front of more people or get on a podcast. There's something that comes from that. It could be launching a nonfiction book. It could be launching their podcast, launching a keynote speaking business. It could be expanding their orbit to different people. It could be getting more thought leadership, right? I can remember one client came to us and he's like, I want to get out there because the more well I'm known, the higher prices I can charge. Right. And so he was maximizing profits on there. So people come to us and we start with, what are you trying to do with it? Right. Then we look and say, who are your ideal people? Right. You don't want to talk to everyone. You can't say enough of the right things to the wrong people. Yeah. So we've got a lot of relationships, a lot of data, right? If you say my people go to this conference, I can tell you the top 30 podcasts they subscribe to, right? If you tell me my people follow Gary V, well, you're probably not going to get on Gary's podcast, but I can find through our databases that we license all the podcasts that his fans subscribe to. So we do that. So they're hiring us and really
because you guys have access to the data.
We have access to the data. Right. We've got the relationships with the podcast hosts. Yep. So, podcast hosts want to have 3 people on their shows. They're friends of friends, and people they want to be their friends, right? So we're sort of the friends of friends. And then also we make it easy, right? Early on, we had a client that said, I love working with Interview Valet because you let me be the guest and you take care of the rest. So, really we set everything up. We brief our clients on, this is the podcast. Here's the audience. Here's common questions. Here's all their social media, almost like going on stage, right? We'll give you the brief, hand you the microphone.
You guys handle it. They just got to show up. Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Yeah. So it was funny the other day. So my old trainer, I believe it or not, I actually used to be in shape. But when I started my company, I had some time. And so I went to the gym every day and I had a trainer. Anyways, long story short, he's really started expanding his business and, watching some of the stuff that I've been doing. And, when I go to these things like the Stages workshop, I share it with everybody, right? I always have like, hey man, you got to check this out. You got to do this. Like, here's what I'm doing to grow my business. And so, he started doing that and he had this podcast. And I noticed like he'd done 70 episodes and he had his average episode got 5 views. I'm like, bro, you don't even have a description in your episode, in your title. Like, what are you doing? Nobody's seeing this. Nobody's going to look up Matt Wilson episode 21 because nobody knows what that is.
His mom will find it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's basically what it is. It's like his mom, his aunt, and his sister's been watching every episode, and that's about it. So anyways, he was like, dude, I want you on the podcast. I said, dude, I will. I'll come on your podcast. I was like, but you got to promise me something. You got to promise to give me 30 minutes beforehand so I can teach you what I'm doing to go from 100 subscribers to now almost 10,000 subscribers in just, 6-7 months. And he did, and now you see his numbers just skyrocketing. Well, I mean, it's easy to skyrocket from 3 or 4 viewers, but just those little tweaks of the right descriptions. And so for those out there that have, you guys work with some of the biggest and the best podcasts out there in every type of vertical you can think of. What are some of the things, what are the biggest differences between the ones that are crushing it and the ones that are just kind of getting by? They get a few viewers, they might get some attention, but they're not the ones that you want to be reaching out to.
I would say bigger is not better, right? Better is better. And so sometimes you could have a podcast and, is it Joe Rogan? Well, no, it's not, but it could be a dental podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And it's that consistency. It's that authentic conversation. If I just want a rehash of everything, I'll go to Chat GPT. But that cutting conversation, also that it is a discussion. It's not asking someone the same 10 questions, right?
I can't stand that. That's so annoying.
And it reminds me of what television was like in the 50s or something.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Yeah, exactly.
And it's like, that's what podcasting was 20 years ago. Right. And now it's just cringy. So the other thing too, is that video, right? Before COVID, less than 1 out of 5 podcasts had video. Now 90% have video. Okay. And the true people will say, well, podcast is an audio only format. I don't care, right? I don't care where people find out about me as long
Right.
as they find out about me. So,
Exactly.
Joe Rogan, is it a podcast? I don't know. You can watch it on Facebook clips, on TikTok, wherever it is, so it's one of those formats where it's easy to create, and then the best people are repurposing it to put it to other places.
Yep, exactly. I mean, you've got your shorts and it's so easy. It makes content creation and everything else so much easier when you're doing the video. You're banging out the video, the audio, and a week's of content in 30 minutes. Like, that was my biggest thing, because I knew I needed to post more. I knew I needed more reels. And so I'm like, well, what's the easier way of doing that? Of having a 30-minute video, that's 10 reels. I got to do the podcast anyway. But now what I really want to focus on is getting on other people's stages, right? Because it's, yes, we're growing in viewers, we're growing in listeners every single month. I mean, we're almost doubling our numbers month after month. But, I want to reach people all over the country, right? Like, I'm looking at the numbers, and there's a good part in the Northeast, right? I'm in Maryland, so it's a lot of people in Maryland, Pennsylvania, DC. And then I can also tell, like, wherever the guest is, you'll see an influx there, because I'm very diligent about tagging them and, putting stuff out there on social media. But, obviously like you said, it's more important to focus on the quality, right? Bigger is not always better. You want to get in front of the right people. So when I'm out here looking for these podcasts, how does the regular person, like, if I wanted to go out and find a podcast, do I need to go to somebody like you because you guys have that data? Or is there a way to kind of, take a look and see, okay, well, this guy's got a ton of followers, and you watch a few episodes and it seems to be decent? Like, how does any regular person figure out that data? Or is it just, that's why you guys exist?
You could do it with the data, or you could also guess, right? And one of the great things, and when we started 10 years ago, right, there wasn't data out there.
Right.
So one of the things we noticed is often the audience is like the host or aspires to be like the host. Right. If you want to target, young females, don't go on a podcast hosted by me, right? And vice versa. If they're talking about business stuff, well, that's a business podcast, right? Yeah. And sometimes it's testing the different audiences and finding out what works, right? So asking people, how'd you find out about me? Or building a separate landing page to send them to, because sometimes you can be surprised. It's like, we had one client, love this story. Craig Cody, he's a CPA. He came to us and it's got more personality than anybody you've ever met, or at least a CPA. And he's like, I want 50 clients in 50 states and 50 industries. And I'm like, why? And he's like, because I want to get diversified, right? Last downturn, he was brick and mortar on Long Island. So we start going on all these different podcasts, right? Throwing darts at the dartboard, more or less. And we find that we get him on a dental podcast. And the numbers show this worked out really well. Right. So Shaheen, we took him to the data, and he's like, oh yeah, I've already gotten, a couple clients from that show. I love dentists. They're, recession proof professionals, good cash flow. Yeah. And so sometimes it's testing that and just getting that feedback on it. Testing different things and find out where your audience is.
Yeah. Huh. Interesting. So it sounds like it makes more sense, especially for the busy entrepreneur that's really trying to focus on scaling and doesn't have the time to do the research and to do the guessing. It makes more sense to hire a company like you. So let's talk about the cost. What is this going to cost me? Is it going to cost me $5-10 grand like it is to go to an event? Or like what is it going to, how does it work?
Yeah, if you look at the industry, there's really 3 different buckets, right? So there's the ones that are, I call them Craigslist, right? And it could be a Facebook group where new podcasters and new guests get together. There's other ones like Podmatch or podcastguest.com, right? Under $50, you can be in this database and get connections there. All right, that's an easy way to do it. Next one is people that are podcast bookers. Right. And those are the people that they could be a third world VA. It could be a podcast host with a couple of relationships. It could be a group of of people, and they're out there, but their focus is just getting bookings. And that can charge anywhere from, you can see some of those that are overpriced for what they do. You look at somewhere between $250 to, a couple $1,000s a month. Right. And then there's agencies that look at this as a marketing channel, right? They're marketing agencies, they're PR agencies that help you do that. And that's where I would put us in, right?
Okay.
We look at this as podcast interview marketing. It's not about the interview. We don't measure our success on how many crappy random podcasts we get you on. It's the results that come from the right ones. And so you're looking at engagements starting at like $1,000 up to, heck, you can get full PR agencies that are charging you $10,000 a month. Ours typically start at about $1,000 a month for depending on what you're doing.
Right. And then so this $1,000 a month, like you said, it's not about the number of podcasts you're getting them on, right? You're trying to get them certain results out of the fewest amount of podcasts, or what is it? How does that work?
Yeah. As a business owner, think about it. What we are all optimizing for is profits, right?
Yeah.
These people,
cost per acquisition. You want to get,
no, I'm not even going to go beyond that, because a lot of times people come and say, "Oh, you want more leads?" No, leads are like Facebook likes to me, right? I want to work with people that value what I do, can afford it, and they love it so much. It's bringing them so much value that they're giving me money and profits. So we're always looking at that. We're looking at what they're trying to optimize for, right? We've got some clients that do it for SEO value, right? The SEO game continues to change, but backlinks have always been consistent, right? And every time you're on a podcast interview, you get a backlink. And the people that understand that, it's like, hey, do you want to be on Joe Rogan, or do you want to be on the Kelly School of Business podcast out of Indiana University? And they're like, oh, you mean the backlink that ends in .edu? Give me that one. That one is priceless.
Yeah. That's huge. So there's a lot of different benefits, obviously, to being on podcasts. You get in front of more people. It should turn into more business. But beyond that, like, what is there a number of podcasts or a number of that they should be trying to get in front of every month? Like, is there too much that you could be doing? Like, I see some people, they're trying to do 2-3 podcasts a week. Like, is there a way to overdo it, or would you say not really?
Yes. Right.
You can overdo it. Okay.
Very much so. And I've had people come to me and say, I want to be on 100 podcasts this month. It's like, why? Oh, because it'll be massive exposure. Well, so is streaking, right? That doesn't mean it's going to happen with business. So what we'll typically tell people, and if you're doing a book launch or a product launch, it's a little bit different. But for most people, if you're just continually looking to build your brand, what we have learned is I don't advise doing less than 2 great interviews a month, because it's like reinventing the wheel, right? You'll never get comfortable with it. Flip side is, I would not say do more than 1 great interview a week. And some people will go, well, if 1 a week is good, let's do 1 a day. Well, you're not going to be able to promote it. You're not going to be able to repurpose it, and it starts becoming like speed dating, right? Yeah. And you're going to get a bad reputation out there, right? Because, most hosts, before they say yes to it as a guest, they're going to go back and say, what podcast were they on? Yeah. Did they promote it? And if you're just doing this speed dating and not, it's like one night stands, not promoting the podcast, doing anything like that, any reputable podcaster will say, no, you're not doing that to me and my audience.
I've started looking into that recently. Like, it's blown my mind. Like, some people, they're not even on Facebook. And it's like, one person I looked up the other day, all they had was LinkedIn. And I'm like, how do you get away with just having, like, why do you even have a business if all you have is LinkedIn in 2024?
Well, it depends. It depends where their clients are, right? I don't think everybody has to be
B2B.
B2B. I mean, but we had one client came to us, and she wanted us to promote her. She's got a great high level B2C medical, I guess it's a meditation tool, right? It's
Okay.
great, clinically proven and everything like that.
Right.
And we went through and looked at the podcast that she'd been on. She'd worked on it with some other agency that said, oh, just do more and more and more. And she started to do Groundhog Day interviews, right? Every interview was the same. She never promoted it. She never, when she was tagged in social media, she never responded to it. And she got such a bad reputation in podcasting that, as we were talking to her, we reached out to podcast hosts. Some of them, she'd been on their show and they're like, nope, never would have her on. Right. Because it was a transaction. It was a one night stand. She pretty much shut down that entire avenue. And we had to tell her, it's like, this isn't going to work for you.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a shame. So, I mean, big piece of advice for people out there. If you're going to start getting on podcasts, do it right. Yeah. Speak to somebody that knows what they're doing, knows what they're talking about. Because that was my idea when I first started getting into podcasts. I'm like, I'm going to try to get on as many as I can. But that makes perfect sense. You really got to, you got to spend the time to really focus, even, focus as much. So should we focus as much attention or more attention on a podcast that we're on versus a podcast we're doing?
I think both of them are the same, right?
Okay. I think that's what I get based on what you've said so far. I just wanted to make sure I understood that.
Yeah, there's a book, and I wish I could remember where it came from. I think it was Carol Dweck's book where she talked about, both people doing their half, right? Well, I'll do my half, you do your half. Well, what happens if the other person doesn't do their 50%? Then we're going to miss it, right? Yeah. I look at it as
we're not going to get the results.
Yeah, you promoted 100%. As a guest, I'll promote it 100%. And guess what? We're going to both get great results from this. And when you and your friends are talking, because podcasters know podcasters, and they say, hey, have you had any good guests lately? You'll start talking about the great guests you've had. Yeah. So it's one of those things where if you do it right from the beginning, it gets easier and easier. Right. If you do it wrong, you're going to mess it up. It's
going to get harder and harder, right?
Yep.
That makes perfect sense, man. It's funny, the first podcast I was ever on, I was nervous as hell. I'm doing all kinds of research on these guys and watching a bunch of episodes, and it was you're just having a conversation. Like, somebody came up to me the other day and they're like, man, I've been watching your podcast. Like, it's really good. Like, how did you take training on that and this? I'm like, we're just having a conversation. I see some people that do podcasts and you can tell they're really overthinking it. They're planning their questions each time, and they're doing it's not natural. They're not having a good conversation. It's just like you said, it's like speed dating. It's boom, boom, boom. And it's just boring as hell. You never get any real value out of it. So your company will take a look at a business. You're taking a look at who their ideal customer is, where those ideal customers are hanging out, what they're viewing, what they're listening to, and then you're helping them get on those podcasts. Now, after that, do you guys do anything in the after the podcast part?
We do, and this has been based on feedback that we've gotten from our clients, right? Okay. Remember I said you can get a month's worth of content from every podcast. Yeah. So we were doing it for ourselves, and then we had so many clients asking, hey, can you do it for me too? So redoing it and getting the blog out of it, the posts, the quote images, all the reels, right? You can get a month's worth of content out of each one. You and I are creating just as much content as Gary Vee in a day. The only difference is he's capturing more of it and then repurposing it. Yep. So we do that for him. And then, since my background is in inbound marketing, we talk with people a lot about that, right? It's not just about showing up and having an entertaining conversation. There's got to be something to move people from being a passive listener to an active visitor to an engaged lead, right? And all of our testing has shown, send them to one place on your website and give them 3 ways to say yes. Meet them where they are, right? Give them a small yes that doesn't take a lot of time or money. Give them a medium yes, takes a little bit of time or money, and then give them a heck yes, right? If they hear you and you're the answer to prayer, don't slow them down in the funnel.
Yep. Yeah, I love that. Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, you got to realize that the whole point of doing the podcast is to get customers, right? Like everybody says, yeah, I want more eyes. I want more exposure. I want more. But what's the end of that, right? Why do you want more eyes? Why do you want more exposure? It's because you want more customers, right? Period.
And
So
I'm going to take that one step further, right? You want more profits. You just don't want any customers. You want ideal customers. And I think this idea that marketing is supposed to be magnetic, and so many people are like, yeah, I want it to attract everyone. It's like, that's not how a magnet works.
No.
It attracts the right things and repels the other ones. If somebody listens to you for 30 or 45 minutes, they're going to turn you up or turn you off. And either way is fine. If they don't resonate with what you say, figure it out before you've spent time and money, with a sales development rep trying to qualify them.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, like, one thing I tried to explain to somebody the other day about the podcast game is the people listening to the podcast know that. They are your potential customer and they want to be sold. They wouldn't be listening to the podcast if they weren't interested in what you had to say, right? Like, that's why they listen to this podcast every week, is because they want business tips. They want to hear different ways that they can grow their business and scale and learn about podcasts and learn about marketing and learn about business funding and what have you, right? Like, you're not getting over on them. They're there because they want to learn from you, right? They are your customer. They want to buy from you. Right? That's why they're listening to you. I just thought it was funny because this guy's like, well, I don't want my podcast to be about my business. I want it to be, fun and funny. I'm like, well, what's the point? Why? Why? It just, I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me. But
like, even if you're a comedian doing it, right?
Yeah.
You're still getting your content out there.
Gigs. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. There's a point, right?
Yeah. 100%. 100%. Like, it's even like the, you'll see a couple, that are, they're talking about their marriage and their life and their whatever. And then next thing you know, they got a book that came out and they got this and they got that, right? Like, at the end of the day, every single podcast is a way for them to get their product, story, something out there that's going to have some sort of monetary value. It doesn't matter what kind of podcast it is. Otherwise,
you think about
it's not there long.
It's tapping into other people's audiences, right?
Yeah.
When you go on the Late Show or whatever, people just don't show up to the couch, right?
Right.
They're there. Wow, they're there at the same time their new movie comes out, or they're there as their political campaign is kicking off. Those things. So they're always there for a reason.
Yep. 100%. You got to, do everything with purpose and intention. Otherwise, don't do it at all, right? So, so Tom, you have provided some great insight about podcasts. Why don't you tell the guests and the listeners and the viewers out there what you've got for them as far as a gift this week?
Yeah. So remember I said before, send people to one place and give them 3 ways to say yes. Yeah. I'll show you how to do that. You can copy it, right? So it's called a welcome page. You can see it by going to interviewvalet.com/Versa. That's a welcome page. And everything we talked about will be there. And there's 3 things that can help you. First one is a podcast interview marketing assessment, right? 10 questions. Will this work for you? I wrote a book called Podcast Guest Profits, How to Grow Your Business with the Targeted Interview Strategy. You can buy it on Amazon, but if you go there, I'll mail you a copy if you're in the States. If you're overseas, I'll email you a copy. Awesome. And then finally, if you listen to this and you're like, hey, I think this would work for me, I'd like to learn more. Well, I'd be happy to talk with you. Me and my team will put the calendar scheduling link up there. You can grab a time to see how podcast interview marketing could work for you. And all of that is back at interviewvalet.com/Versa.
Awesome. Interviewvalet.com/Versa. Now, question, if there's somebody like me that wants to do all 3, is that doable?
Oh, sure.
Great. You don't have to just do one of them, right?
You can pick any 3 that you want. And that's one of the other thing about you'll see on the welcome page, you always put your navigation there, right? If somebody listens to you for 30 or 45 minutes and they want to look around your site, let them.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. So I'm excited to look at this navigation page because we've been doing a lot of revamping of our website and our funnel and creating different ways to, to drive in traffic from all this, all the content that we are doing. Because it's just, we've done a lot more content. Now we're focusing on, really dialing in the content and taking it somewhere, so yeah, I'm excited to take a look at it. Excited to jump on a call with you and learn more about this. I know I need to get on other people's podcasts and do more of it, to get my story out there more, right? Rather than, I can ask questions all day, but man, I had so much fun the other day, just me getting to talk and answer the questions. It was a good time. So thanks for joining us today, Tom. I know you got a lot of stuff going on. I will be on that website. I'll share everything in the description below. And in the description, that way people can reach out to you and you can help them get on the right podcast in front of their ideal customers.
All right. Thanks, Shaheen.
Awesome. Thanks, Tom. We'll talk soon.